There are several kinds of lists in HTML. There's UL, which we're using, which generally shows up as a bulleted list. It's an unordered list. There's OL, which is an ordered list, and usually shows up numbered. There's a third kind, a description list. Let's look that up. HTML description list. The description list element on MDN. DL. The element encloses a list of groups of terms. Terms are DT. And descriptions provided by DD elements. Used to be called a definition list. Description list as of HTML5, I believe. Common uses for this element are to implement a glossary or to display metadata like a list of key value pairs. Well, that's what we're doing. We're showing a list of key value pairs, right? So name is basically a DT, and then Davy is a DD. A description of the term described by DD. So maybe that would be a better kind of list to build in this case. Let's look at an example. So here's our description list. Description term, Firefox. Description, a free open source cross-platform browser corporation, hundreds of volunteers. So, again, don't copy this down. Oh, here we go. Ooh, multiple terms, single description. Neat. Don't copy this down, but here's maybe what we could do. What I want to show up here is a DT that contains, I'm sorry, a DD, right? Or DL. That's the list. And inside it, a DT that says name, and a DD, the actual description, that says Davy. And we could, for simplicity's sake, we could also wrap these in an LI. Just to make it a little easier on ourselves. So then we'd have an LI that contains a term of age and a description of 38. So that might be nice. Might be a little easier to style that way if the label and the value weren't all just a single string. Think we can do it? Think we're capable? I know we are. Pardon me. All right, so what needs to change? Render list builds the list, right? Before it was a UL. What if we just change that to DL? Sure, that was easy. Then we render a bunch of list items. And what we're saying is this label we now want in a separate DT element inside that list item. That doesn't sound too bad. Just focus one thing at a time. Yeah, Khalil.
Shouldn't we create like a LI first and then DL?
So the DL is the outermost element, right? Yeah, we'll create those first, but render list, we can just change that with one little letter change. We'll go ahead and do that. So yeah, now it'll be a DL that just contains a bunch of LIs with no DTs and DDs. That's okay. So how's render list item going to change? It'll still return an LI at the end, but the LI, instead of just having some text, will actually have a DT and a DD in it. The DT contains the label. The DD contains the description, the value, which is either a string or a div. So instead of item.textContent equals this string with the label in it, let's create a DT element. We're old pros at creating elements now, right? Let's say const term equals document dot create element dt. And then the text content of that can be just the label. I'm not going to put the colon there. Now we've got it in a separate element. We can style it separately. Now we need to make sure that that term ends up inside the item, right? Because now it's just floating out there. Now what about the value? Instead of just sticking it into the item, we're going to build a DD element. So we created the term. Let's create the description. Const description equals document dot create element DD. And then we're going to try to append the value to the description there instead of directly to the item. And if that doesn't work, we're going to change the text content of the DD element, which I've saved in the variable description. And then before I return my item, I need to make sure I append both of those things. Item.append child term and item.append child description. Get it? Yeah.
Shouldn't we append the description to the term and then the term to the item?
So let's look at our example here. Here's the term and here's the description. So the description does not go inside the term. They both go inside the list item. Does that make sense? So they're both appended to the item itself. Now, this example doesn't actually show an LI. We're only doing that to kind of make it simpler for ourselves. Yeah.
So the order is what matters here. So the first DD will go with the first DT, and the second, okay.
That's right. Yeah. Multiple terms and descriptions. Yeah. This term goes with this description. This term goes with this description. Yeah. Let's see what this does. So we didn't have to actually change too much. Oh, let's see. Yeah.
So when we run this, so what happens is that you get a dot, and below the dot, you get the elements, right? So
Yeah.
how do you make sure that then next to the dot you get the
So each LI will have a little dot there. Then here's the DT and here's the DD. So this is how it's styled by default. That's gross, but it's there. If we inspect it, I'll right click on name here and say inspect. This is basically the markup I was looking for. It's not how I want it to appear, but we can fix that. So yeah, style-wise, this is not great. Structure-wise, I think it's okay. So I'll go ahead and commit it like this. Say use a description list. Then we can work on making it look nicer. Questions before we move on? Yeah, go back to the code. Yes, with list item, instead of just throwing a bunch of text content into the item itself, I actually create a DT change the text content of that, create a DD, and then either append if it's the div, or change the text content if it's not. And then make sure I append both to the item before I return it. Yeah.
So for my name, I get not a number.
Not a number? Okay. So it seems like at some point you're trying to do math with your name is usually what something like that means. Let's have a look. This could be a useful demonstration. So instead of plus equal here, you have equal plus. So yeah, let's do that and demonstrate that up here. So a very small typo, and you get a really bizarre error message. So she said description text content equals plus value instead of plus equals. So now it's going to try to do some math with a string, which isn't a thing, right? So it returns NaN, not a number.
Wait, what if you put a number?
Let me put a number there.
What does it do?
Try it out.
Or what if you do equals plus number? Because it said
Okay, let's try this first. Let's see what happens if there's a number there. Just converts the number to a string. What if we did this, but the thing on the right side were actually a number? Oops, refresh.
I need to take this. Sorry.
Okay. Same thing. It will just convert the number to a string. Right, let me make sure I didn't break it. Cool.